Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Marketing Masterclass webinar. It's on advertising, PR, and I've got joining me today Anna Hern, who is the Managing Director of Ridgemount. Hello, Anna.
Hello.
I'm Lee Jones from MBS. I'm the Head of Manufacturer Solutions, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the marketing cycle today before I hand over to Anna to do a presentation. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. All the attendees' microphones are muted. You will have the chance to ask questions, and we will follow those up individually after the webinar. If you would like to know more about anything that you've seen today, please feel free to contact the MBS. You can contact us at manufacturers@thembs.com or visit thembs.com. And I'm pretty certain that Anna will go through Ridgemount's contact details in the presentation. So if you have any questions for myself or Anna, please feel free to direct those afterwards. And any questions that are asked during the presentations will be followed up separately. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the marketing cycle and really where PR fits in this before we pass over to Anna. For a lot of manufacturers, obviously, it's very critical to make sure that they are getting seen in the right places and being seen correctly. So that's obviously where the PR bit comes in. So what we've done with MBS is we've come up with something called the specification marketing cycle. And what I'm talking about is this. So what you can see here is the little infograph that we've got. It's a circular infograph, and it actually follows the RIBA plan of work stages around. So we go from stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Obviously, stage 0 with the plan of work doesn't really impact a manufacturer in regards to marketing and PR. But we are impacted by every other aspect. Now, this infograph, along with all the relevant terminologies and timelines next to it, which if you're struggling to view those at the moment, don't worry, I'll cover those in more depth as I go through this presentation. But this is a free document that's available to download at thembs.com, so feel free to visit that and take a download and use it as your own will. Thank you very much. So, looking at stage 1. So with any typical construction projects, this is really where research starts to take place with the specifiers and the contractors, etc., depending on what route the actual project's going, whether it's traditional or design and build. But for a manufacturer, obviously, this is really where the awareness comes in of your brand. So we're looking at things like SEO. So this is making sure that things like keywords, etc., within your websites, product listings, all that kind of thing are making you visible on the search engines. Getting that right is absolutely paramount. We've then got things like social media. So making sure that your accounts, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., are all up to date and you're managing those properly. It is amazing how many people will now actually do a lot of research through these platforms. So it's something that really mustn't be misplaced. There's then events. Obviously, in the past 12 months, these have taken quite a drastic turn. And the face-to-face events are absolutely fantastic. And hopefully we'll be able to get back to those soon. But there's been a lot of online event presence. And obviously in the image there, we've got the MBS's Construction Leaders Summit, which we have the latest version of that is being broadcast on the 21st and 22nd of April. So again, you can download an invitation to that at thembs.com, and it's free to attend. We've got some great speakers, but there's a lot of these things going on, and there's a lot of manufacturers participating in them, and it's a great way to get your voice out and get your brand recognized in a situation where we can't actually meet face to face. There's then PR itself. So this is things like knowledge articles and basically unpaid for promotion as such, where you can be placed within magazines, journals, etc., and a lot of other things which Anna is going to cover quite widely in a presentation. But making sure that your brand and the thought leadership piece with your brand is out there, and people remember that, and they're going to recognize it and keep looking for your brand moving forwards. This is when CPD takes place as well. So typically, if an architect especially is looking for CPD, they have to do 35 hours a year. However, they will tend to want to know knowledge on certain products, systems, and subjects at the time when it's actually applicable to them. So 9 times out of 10, there will be an actual project in the background that's relating to this. MBS offer the RIBA CPD service, and we can see that in the graphic there, and you're more than welcome to take a look at that at ribacpd.com. There's then things like partnerships. So this is something that I've got showing here on the images all the different partners that MBS work with. Now, all of our manufacturers are partners. We work with them to make sure that their brands are recognized and out there and visible to the people that are going to be specifying them. But there's also things like software partners and so forth that we work with. So letting your customers know, or potential customers, about all the different partners that you might work with can strengthen that and show that it's not just something that's necessarily pigeonholed with your company. You've actually got quite broad horizons, and that's something you can share with them. There's then word of mouth. There's a big saying that obviously one customer tells X amount of customers good news and so forth. I know we do hear a lot that people only sort of report when they've had a bad experience, but it's amazing that how many people do actually share great experiences as well. So quality products, quality service, etc. It's something that you really should be relying on, and making sure that you're following up all of the previous points: social media, search engines, getting literature case studies, that kind of thing, obviously helps to convey that message. And then MBS Source. So this is our online product search engine. People can come and search for products here. They can search for manufacturers, but we also host those case studies and literature. So it's something that you can actually go as a specifier to actually take a look at. And a bit like the types of websites, sort of Amazon, Auto Trader, Rightmove, that kind of thing, it's easy for them to do that in one place. Now, whilst your own website is absolutely imperative to get right, advertising through a platform like MBS Source can also help to broaden the scope of people that you can reach. And then content marketing. So making sure that you've got things like knowledge articles, maybe webinars yourself that you could maybe host online and people can view those as and when they need to. Podcasts is another great one that you could take a look at. And obviously then there's traditional routes like magazines and such. But making sure that you're getting this awareness out in as many channels as you can is obviously going to help at the early stages. Moving into stage 2, and this is where the concept design stage is usually done within a construction product. This is where the interest really starts to pick up for your products and systems, as well as the brand. So it goes from moving from being aware of your brand and the types of things that you do to actually starting to focus on the actual products and systems and the services that you offer specifically. So in this particular case, your website and making sure that the imagery is absolutely the most important thing to get right here. Obviously, there's no competitors on your website. We've got an example here of one of MBS's partners. This is 299 Lighting. Their website's very, very fresh. Some absolutely fantastic images on it. It's interactive, so it covers the interactive tools piece. It's got links to the CPD and the other services that they do. It's just a good example, and I'm pretty certain they wouldn't mind you going and taking a look at that. On with the case studies and literature, obviously MBS Source then comes into this, and what you can see here is we've got some featured case studies. Every manufacturer's landing page, you have the opportunity to upload case studies. But the great thing about this is you can upload those high-res images, you can get a brief description. You can then go to the manufacturer themselves and take a look at the relevant case studies within this, and also the literature. But with the case studies themselves, these could be hosted on your own site. And anytime that those are viewed, it will actually direct that person to your website, which again is great because there's no competitors on your site. So moving on to stage 3, this is where the spatial planning would conduct in a construction project. And it's really where the systems, the products start to really take shape within the design of the building or the infrastructure project, whatever it is that the people are working on. So obviously, the obvious thing there is product data. This is really where product data comes into its own, and it's where things like MBS Source and your website listings could actually help you and help the specifier make better informed choices. So with MBS Source listing, every manufacturer would list their products. In this case, I've searched for solid wood flooring, and it's actually bought in the solid wood flooring company, as amongst others. You can see that for the particular products, that all of the data relating to those is listed against digital properties with attributes associated to them. In an age where we're looking to conform and achieve the golden thread, this is absolutely paramount. But notably as well there, you can see that it recommends different products, but it also has third-party certification. Now, in an era with the draft building safety bill currently under review, and with the planned stage gates coming in, there's going to be more liability put on the lead specifier and lead contractor, and third-party certification will really back up you as a manufacturer being able to prove that what you're claiming your products do, they actually do. There's then BIM, and what we can see here is we've got a typical residential property, and we can actually view what we're doing here. I'm going to drop in a BIM model, and you can see that we can actually search for this directly within the software. So MBS's plugin is available for all of the top BIM software tools, and you can actually download the product. You can see here that we're going to zoom in, and I was looking at downloading a radiator in this case. So in the model itself, this will zoom in, and then that will be attached to the wall, and it's as easy as dropping one of your products into that. Now, the great thing with that is obviously all the data in the background is yours, and then that will convey through into the next stage, which will be stage 4. Stage 4 is the technical design stage against the plan of works, and the main aim here for any specifier or contractor is to get the final written specification completed for all of the technical products and systems that are going into the building. So absolutely paramount here is the specification tools. And what we can see here is we've got MBS source, and again, I'm going to be searching for a direct acting heater like we saw in the BIM model just, and it brings in a load of different options. And I'm going to pick a different one this time just to make sure that we're fair to all the manufacturers that we have. You can see that the specifier can actually scroll through and check the data, but how do they then go and add that to a specification? Well, what we've got now is MBS Chorus. This is our cloud-based specification tool, and this is used by the majority of specifiers in the UK. Typically, adding a product to a specification would work how we're seeing here. And again, you can see I'm looking for room heaters. Let's set this as the ground floor heaters for this particular project. And then we go to select a manufacturer. And what you can see now is that it's actually brought in a load of options. So any manufacturer that's products are hosted within MBS source are actually hosted within Chorus as well, which allows the specifier to just click and add that manufacturer to the spec. Hopefully that clarifies a little bit as to what the specifier does and how Chorus and Source work together. But moving then into stage 5, how does that then relate to things like procurement or installation? So in the construction and manufacturing stage, obviously the plan of works now recognises manufacturing because of the big uprising offsite manufacturer. But obviously this is where products need to be procured and they need to be installed and fitted. So going back to that specification tool, not only can you specify the products, you can actually select the execution clauses and specify how these should be installed or applied. In this case, I'm looking at some cement paint, and how would this be applied? You'd need to factor in things like what the substrate was that it was being applied to. Is it a rebuild? Has it got any previous coatings on? Is it new build? And then you'd set the numbers of coats like primers, top coat, etc. And you can see that that's been set up there. But more than that, obviously, the manufacturer is now applied to this. So it's specifying the manufacturer's products, but also how that manufacturer's product should be used. So what that can then do is actually linking back to the source listings. You can see here we went with the Tikkurila product, and straight from MBS source, we've then linked directly to the manufacturer's product page, and they've got a great listing on where it's able to actually buy those products and where they can be procured from. It can be set by region. In this case, we're looking for WS13, which is Lichfield in the UK, and locate nearby, and it will tell me all of the relevant places where that can be procured from. So I think the key message there is that digital specifications are really, really powerful. They can do a lot more than just name a manufacturer within the spec. And obviously this is helping to build strong relationships. If you were a manufacturer, a lot of manufacturers will provide written specifications as a service to specifiers, and MBS offer Chorus for manufacturers as well. So if it's something that you consider maybe writing specifications and making sure that you'd like to keep things up to date in the right format and linking that to your source content, please feel free to drop one of the team a note and we'd be happy to chat with you about that. And then the last thing, obviously, is they're looking for a project partner. So building that strong relationship is only going to help you move forward and forward. And as the infograph shows through the marketing cycle, it is a cycle. So re-engagement, how does that fall into it? Well, you're looking at obviously login details in your CRM, but building that relationship up with those clients. People are looking for a project partner and not necessarily just somebody to sell them something. So this then obviously allows you to log things in. It allows you to check back in with people. You're building up that portfolio of clients. And then ultimately, this all feeds back into stage 1. So it moves on to the next project, and we're back there at the awareness stage. So having your brand in the forefront of somebody's mind at stage 1 obviously helps from you having to do as much work as it does in the awareness stage, but making sure that you're keeping up to date also reiterates the fact that you are a company that means business, and somebody is going to want to keep dealing with you time and time again. So just to touch on MBS, what we've covered there, we've touched on RIBA CPD. You can visit ribacpd.com if you'd like to know more about CPD provision. We've covered MBS Source, which is the online search tool for products. We've got thousands of manufacturers and products in there who are getting specified daily. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about that, again, please visit thembs.com or drop us a note at manufacturers@thembs.com. And then the last thing we saw was how Chorus fits into this cycle. Chorus is the specification writing software. So any MBS building spec or Uniclass spec will predominantly have been written using this tool. If you'd like to consider using that yourselves, then you can obviously write specifications for specifiers in the format that they're using and actually work directly with them in the project. Saves a load of hassle for the specifier, but it also gives you a bit of USP as a manufacturer. Hopefully that's covered what the specification marketing cycle is and where all the different things fit in. And what I'd like to do now is hand over to Anna, who is going to talk to us about PR and what it's all about. Anna, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lee. That was a lot of detail in your presentation. I have to get hold of a copy of it so I can read some of the small print. What I'm going to talk about today is advertising and PR. People use those terms a lot, but how often do we actually stop and think what we mean by them? Working for a marketing agency, it's quite important. So it's a subject I've spent a while thinking about. So what is PR to start with? My own personal description used to be that advertising was shouting at people and public relations was having a conversation. But that's a slightly informal way of looking at it. So to get the definitions cracked, I thought I'd go to some people who really should know what they're talking about. So I started with the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. On their website, they have a pretty clear definition. They talk about public relations being to do with reputation and establishing and maintaining goodwill. Quite clear about what we're trying to achieve, not clear at all about how we get there. So they're not prescriptive. They talk about what the effect is meant to be, but not the means by which we achieve it. Then I went to have a look at the Public Relations and Communications Association, which is the association for the PR agencies, and they're pretty clear too. Public relations is again about reputation. No detail at all about how you do it. So I think we're pretty clear about what PR is supposed to be in terms of the end result. So then I hopped across to the advertising side of the business to see what advertising was about and how their trade associations define what they do. So I went to the Advertising Association first. This is the organisation that represents the advertising agencies. Spoke to a very nice lady called Holly. Couldn't find a definition on the website, so I phoned them. And she suggested that I email the question and she'd see if they had an answer. So then I tried the Institute of Practitioners of Advertising, which represents the individuals who work in the industry. Again, nothing on the website. But an even nicer lady called Mina at the IPA told me I'd made her afternoon by asking the question, which suggests that it's something she doesn't get asked very often. And then she also suggested that I email her to see if she could find someone to give me an answer. Now, I may be missing something, but it seems odd to me that the people involved in a multi-million-pound industry can't say what it is they actually do. Anyway, Holly got back to me, pointing me in the direction of a blog deep in the AA website by Jeremy Bullmore, who was used to be the CEO of J. Walter Thompson. And this is his definition. As you can see, it's also about influence, but the defining characteristic seems to be on the paid for bit. Actually, in this blog, Jeremy was reflecting on 40 years in the business, and he revised his original definition of advertising to this, in which, as you can see, the definition has moved towards usually paid for, which is interesting. So not really getting much clarity on what advertising actually is. So let's see what normal people use as a definition and resort to Wikipedia. And here you go. It's about money. If you pay for it, it's advertising. Which is interesting because, as a slight aside, I would point out that I've worked in public relations agencies for most of my working life, and I would point out that they generally don't work for free. Just saying. So let's take a moment to consider what the two disciplines tend to look like in practice. This is an early example. I love this book. This is a This was published in 1897, and it's a special commemorative supplement to the London Illustrated News, and it's celebrating Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. Like many things Victorian, it's extravagantly over-engineered. Just look at the quality of the print and the illustrations. But even then, in 1897, publishing something like this was costly, and the publishers needed support in the form of advertising. There are plenty of full-page ads in here, but this is my favourite. It's for Harrods. Look at the strapline, the cheapest store in London for everything. Nice. But the point of this exercise is why Harrods would be in this publication. Why do they pay to get their brand in a publication which is not talking about anything to do with retail? Harrods is buying the distribution. It's a good bet that the readership of the London Illustrated News is the right target audience for Harrods, living in London with at least enough money to buy a newspaper. Harrods is paying for exposure to an audience that someone else has put together. And this is the basic premises of advertising in our trade media too. These are some examples that may look familiar, at least in their structure. Advertisers appreciate that very few people pick up a publication in order to read the advertising. Quite the reverse. We read the publications for the editorial, and the ads have to kind of interrupt us to grab our attention and demand to be seen. Hence the bold colours, the catchy straplines, the simple proposition. And of course, it's paid for, as in the page is paid for. The advertisers are using the journal as a channel to reach their audience, an audience that has been nurtured, created, and defined by the publishers. And an audience is built and retained by the editorial content. It's up to the editor to decide what's likely to be of interest to their readers and to provide it, packaged in engaging, relevant, and interesting stories. And this is what successful PR stories look like in trade publications. I'm using the term PR in inverted commas because many people confuse PR with press relations, which is not what it stands for. However, in this instance, successful press relations looks a bit like this. The right story presented in the right way to the editorial team to generate valuable coverage in the editorial pages. And if you really hit the jackpot, you might get an editorial front cover. This type of coverage is generally held to be very valuable. But is it free? The clients haven't paid for the space, but they will have paid somebody to put the story together, to know the journalists and understand what they're interested in. If they're wise, they will have invested in decent photography and maybe even, a while ago, a press trip to a prestigious project or an installation. None of that's free. This is the type of work I spent my first 10 years in PR doing. We're using the publications in exactly the same way as the advertisers, as a channel to reach our target audience. PR was about understanding the editorial stance of the publications and producing content to appeal not only to the readers, but also to the editor who was in control. Then this happened. In 1990, a scientist named Tim Berners-Lee, working at the CERN project in France, decided it would be a really good idea if computers at the different research facilities working on the project could talk to each other, and the internet was born. The result is a proliferation of data, the like of which has never been seen before. Here are some really amazing statistics. 90% of the data in existence has been published in the last 2 years. Or the amount of data produced by us from the beginning of time till 2003 was 5 exabytes, which is apparently 1 billion gigabytes. The same amount was created every 2 days in 2011, and it's predicted that by 2025, we'll be generating that volume of information every 15 minutes. There's a lot to read. So we don't really need anyone else anymore to decide what we read. We decide for ourselves. We choose what content we take notice of, and advertising, in its purest sense, suffers. No one ever opened a magazine to read the advertising, and no one goes to a website to read the ads there either. We choose what we read not only by the conscious choices that we make, the searches we make, the websites we choose to visit, but also by our unconscious choices. Our search histories are watched and analysed by the platforms we use to ensure that the content we see next is most likely to be of interest to us. We are, consciously or unconsciously, our own editorial team. And this is a huge change affecting how our target audience is finding its information. We represent a lot of manufacturers who sell to specifiers. So we need to find out how specifiers find out about our clients. And the first thing to say is it's not all over for the trade journals. As an agency, we sponsor some market research that takes place every 2 years, most recently in 2019. And we've been watching the reading habits of our audiences change. The good news for the journals is that 78% of our audience still reads them. Whether online or in print, the trusted journals are still important information sources. Although two things, if I were a publisher, would bother me. First is the fast increasing number who don't read any trade journals at all. And second, what's the impact of the last year been on trade journal readership? So where else do our audience find stuff out? Let's look at social media. In 2019 was the first time that readership of social media actually overtook readership of trade journals in our target audience. And these figures relate to architects, which is one of the groups interviewed in the survey and traditionally the highest readers of print publications. Even for this group, you can see that social media is attractive. And this is a breakdown of which channels are most popular. These numbers are quite volatile. Social platforms fall in and out of favour, and it's important to keep up. LinkedIn is hugely important, and for this group, Pinterest is significant too, while Instagram becomes gradually more popular across all user groups over the last few years. But keep in mind that headline figure, 85% of our target audiences use social media. We can't ignore it in any communications program because that's where our audience is. Also, a note about websites. As I've mentioned before, many of Ridgemount's clients are manufacturers, so we need to understand where specifiers find out their technical information about products. And this graph highlights the huge importance of your website. Designing a website that's attractive, informative, regularly updated, and optimized for prominence in search engine rankings is a #1 priority, but that's a different presentation. Let's think about how we use social media for a B2B audience. I'm going to start with Facebook because Facebook has traditionally been the channel that raises most eyebrows when we suggest it for a B2B campaign. But Facebook is a great example. It's a very popular channel. We don't tend to like to admit that we use it for work, but if we're on the channel and if interesting stuff comes up, then we'll read it. And Facebook is a great example of how user-defined content works together with the owners of the site, remembering that no site or search engine is actually free or free from the control of the owner. If you work on Facebook, you have to work with the algorithms. Nobody outside of a very small number of people within Facebook know exactly how the algorithms work. So you have to figure it out by trial and error. And these are some of the things we found out. On Facebook, you have to work to earn your exposure. Facebook rewards you for getting the content right by showing it to more people. The more your content has been shared, liked, commented on, the more people Facebook will show your next post to. The content you as a Facebook user see is decided by Facebook working on your preferences. The algorithm decides, based on the content you've reacted to before, what you're likely to be interested in and shows you more stuff like that. You'll know that if you have 200 friends on Facebook, your daily feed will show you posts by perhaps 10 of those, and then will show you content that it thinks you will be interested in, much of which will be in the form of sponsored posts. Facebook absolutely knows how valuable it is, and it doesn't work for free. As the platform has evolved, so it gives less and less free exposure to business content. If you want the audience, you need to sponsor the posts. What you are essentially getting is exposure to your target audience, and Facebook can provide astonishingly detailed targeting. Used effectively, this platform allows you to put your stories directly in front of your users. No editorial gatekeeper. It's hugely effective, but it's not free. We know that what works is a mix of promoted posts and organic posts. But like all social media, Facebook is a hungry beast and new content is needed all the time. You can't simply come up with a blinding creative and post it repeatedly. It's all about content, and you have to keep it interesting. Insult, or even worse, bore your audience and your history. They can unfollow you, block you, unsubscribe, and that's it. Game over. Get it right, and the results can be dramatic. We recently posted a short video, we promoted it, and we embedded it in our client's page for organic reach. Within 2 weeks, the video has had over 50,000 views. Is that advertising or PR? You tell me. And one of the really great things about using social media is that for the first time, we can see and understand who is reading our content. All the channels come with analytical tools that help us to perfect our content. We amend it all the time to maximize impact. Don't know about you, but we are increasingly being asked to provide ROI measurement defined by numbers, and we can do a lot of numbers. We can see who opens our e-zines and what they choose to do next. We can even tell you which individuals read what. We can see who's liked, shared, or clicked through to your Twitter post. We can monitor social media mentions not only by number, but by sentiment. We can identify what traffic we're driving to the website, and then go onto the website analytics and work out what delivery mechanism is most effective. This is a screenshot of basic Pinterest analytics with a campaign breakdown of one of our Pinterest promotions on the right-hand side. For this phased campaign, we could test different formats, different images, different text to see what works. So it's all very flexible, and you can change the campaign as you go along. And let's not forget YouTube. This is an influencer campaign that we ran for a power tools company last year, delivering highly targeted audience for very specific tools. In this case, what was nice about this campaign was the relationship between the influencer broadcasts and sales was easy to track, and this proved the effectiveness of this approach in the B2B marketplace. And this is a snapshot of a Facebook promotion. I like this one because it nicely highlights one other advantage of social media. It doesn't have geographic boundaries. In this case, we were looking to promote this brand to audiences in the UK, America, and Australia. We always define the objective for our posts when we do sponsored posts on any platform. Are we looking for engagement, web traffic, or video views? There are measurements for all of these and a cost per reaction. At which point the average click-through rate from a banner or skyscraper advertisement on an industry website or journal starts to look a little bit average. And the journals know this too. And sometimes they can be reluctant to give accurate figures on how many readers actually get through to the page where your content has been published. Our traditional press coverage, we used to report on press coverage using a tool called audience reach. How many people could potentially have read the story we placed? In print, that's relatively straightforward. Even broadcast media give an approximate figure. Go to websites and it's a whole new ball game. You ask the website publisher how many readers they have, and you'll get a range of answers, usually a very large number of users per month or page views, whatever. What's much more difficult to find out is how many people read your story, clicked through to your page. They could, but they don't. And I wonder why. My own theory goes back to user-defined content. We go to a website because there's something there we want to read. We select the stories that interest us, and then we jump out of the site. There's no longer any room for the stumble across, and that's as much of a problem for the PR industry as the advertisers. So how do we respond? There's no audience to shout at like there used to be. Everyone's down the road chatting, so we go to find them. This is a user page from Campaign Monitor, which is a distribution tool for self-published newsletters. MailChimp's another, and there are several others. Numbers here too, plenty of numbers. We know who opens the newsletter, we know how many of them click through to read our stories, and this information helps us to develop and refine the content to appeal to our own very targeted audience. As PR people, we're taking on the role of the editor, making decisions, creating content to appeal directly to our own audience. Then we hop onto the website and look at the statistics there. If we run an effective campaign, we can report on the website clicks and pat ourselves on the back because we've done our job and delivered an audience. But we also need to make sure we've delivered the right audience and that the visitors to our website are finding the information that they want. We look at evidence of visitor behavior. How long did they spend reading the content on the landing page? Is that all we wanted them to do? If not, what did they do next? Did they go through the site? Where did they go? All questions we can answer. It's an amazing new opportunity for content creators. Online communications offer a huge range of ways to reach your target audience directly. But what this means is that it's more important than ever to get your content right. You haven't got the experience and wisdom of an editor to guide you. Get the message badly wrong and you'll lose your audience. Once someone has unfollowed you or blocked you, there really isn't any way back. The quality of content is absolutely your priority. And a couple of heartfelt, slightly personal observations here. Just because somebody is under 30 doesn't necessarily mean they are social media experts. Too often, we find brands appointing a young marketer and putting them in complete charge of a social media program. That individual is then supposed to be a content creator, expert writer, and to be able to keep up to speed with rapidly evolving channels, often completely by themselves. It's a big ask, demanding a range of skills that's difficult to combine in a single person. Our digital PR programs will involve a team of at least 5 specialists. It is advertising or PR. We've been a bit theoretical up to now, so I just wanted to talk briefly about an example of how this whole process works in practice. I've gone back to Prismium. This is a campaign we ran a few years ago now, but the reason I like it is because of the amount that was invested in market research to track the impact of this particular campaign. So this is Prismium, the largest manufacturer of electrical and communications cable in the world. You can see from its corporate website how it has historically positioned its brand, but in the UK, the brand faced a problem. One important market for Prismium is electrical cable for domestic installation. Like many manufacturers, Prismium supplies through distribution. Its commercial relationship is with the wholesalers, and it understands them really well. But the people who actually make a brand purchasing choice are the contractors, and that's an audience that Prismium simply didn't have a relationship with. So we started, as we always do, by building a profile of this new target audience. Meet Dave. We did our research, including hanging around outside a lot of wholesalers, and built a profile to understand who it is we're talking to. We also researched this audience to find out what they think of Prismium and what are the characteristics of a cable that might affect their brand choice. Note that we've also focused on Net Promoter Score. I think this is a really important measure as it identifies how positively your audience views your brand. And particularly for a brand offering a premium product, that's a really important measure. Then we started. We needed a website that spoke directly to our audience, so we designed a campaign website to act as the hub for information for this particular audience group. As you can see, its design is very different to the Prismium corporate site, as is the language and type of information we put there. As with any new website, we needed to establish it, and considering the demographic of our target audience, we chose Facebook as a primary communication channel. Optimized content, really important of course, but in the first stages of promoting a new website, pushing users towards it is really important. Using promoted posts, we distributed relevant content to a carefully targeted audience. Getting the tone of the communication right is hugely important. Note the difference in impact of these 2 posts. And we varied the content. Stories are great, but visual communication has great impact too. Video content in particular gets huge engagement and formed an important part of our campaign. And then we measured. This graph shows the level of engagement with Facebook content over the campaign, and it's really easy to identify which posts are most effective. The chart disappears off the scale, by the way, at the point where we're promoting our video. And here you can see the impact over time. When we start with an unknown website, we're pushing visitors towards it through our social media campaign. As visitors get to recognize the value of the content, so they start to search for the site themselves. Properly written, well-targeted, regularly updated content on a website should generate organic traffic over time. And as a side benefit, we discovered that Prismium had many advocates in their audience. So we created a closed Facebook group for those advocates, and this group now serves as an informal focus group, giving Prismium direct contact with the people who use their products every day and have valuable opinions on product development and promotion. A group like this one can be used to build loyalty, with special offers and benefits being provided to the group. And while we measure absolutely everything, the market research carried out on this campaign also shows us how we've moved that key measure of Net Promoter Score over time. And that's what I love about this campaign, is the amount of research and measurement that Prismium invested in, allowing us to demonstrate the effectiveness of a concentrated marketing campaign using new techniques and new channels that they hadn't tried before. But what is that? Is it advertising or PR? None of it's free. Does that make it advertising? But the whole campaign is based on content. Does that make it PR? And content, using PPC to experiment with keywords, then using the content to support your position against the most significant is really important. If you establish your website, don't think of it as an online brochure. It needs to be dynamic, needing new content all the time to keep ahead of the game and responding to changing market demands. I'm not going into SEO or PPC here, that's another presentation, but both should be part of a digital campaign. And what about these? The publications have realised that they need to be more flexible in terms of their offer and have developed a whole range of solutions to allow brands to promote their messages. Advertorials, custom publishing, guest content, sponsored updates, PR or advertising. At Ridgemount, we don't really care what you call it. Our focus remains on providing the best content, however you distribute it. Whatever channels you use, you'll only break through if the content is relevant, engaging, well put together, consistent, and right for your audience. Building audiences, building brands isn't something that happens overnight. Persistence pays, and you need to keep going. Or, as Elizabeth Arden so concisely put it, repetition makes reputation, and reputation makes customers. And if it's reputation, it's our business. My agency is Ridgemount, and we are an integrated marketing agency built for construction and beyond. Very happy to take any questions. And if you'd like to contact us, that's how you do it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anna. That was really, really insightful. I'm still not sure, I think, what the difference is between PR and advertising, but I know obviously one's focuses a lot on the reputation. I think one of the things I picked up from what you were discussing was obviously things like social media plays a big part in PR now. If you're an SME manufacturer and you've not necessarily got a massive team or a massive budget, what's the best route to get started and making sure that you're monitoring this without one of your colleagues sitting on the phone posting sort of post day in, day out constantly? Is there a set procedure that somebody could do to go through? Obviously, I think the services you do look like they would cover that, but any recommendations?
Yeah, actually, that's a really interesting question. When we first started running social media programs for clients, which was years ago now, the social media channels worked in a slightly different way. To take Facebook as an example, I seem to have talked a lot about Facebook today. But obviously the other channels tend to follow Facebook because it's the most successful. When we first started working with Facebook campaigns, you posted content as often as possible because you hit your audience repeatedly. Facebook realized that it was giving away a lot of valuable promotion for free, effectively, if it did that. So on the business pages now, you'll find even if you've built up a following of 6,000 or 7,000 people on your own homepage, when you post a new organic post, only a very small percentage of those people will see it. So the old maxim of you have to post several times a week really no longer applies. Yeah. Your most valuable content is your sponsored content, and you don't have to do that every day. So you can do it as often or as seldom as you choose. If you don't have a huge budget, just don't do it so often. And our own advice is take on board one channel at a time. Don't try and do everything straight away because you just won't have the time to do it all properly. Pick one based on your audience profile and which channel they're most likely to be on, and run it properly. We're finding we're doing a lot more work on LinkedIn at the moment. The channels keep evolving, and LinkedIn's really effective right now, particularly for some audience groups. And LinkedIn does give more visibility to organic content. So probably on that channel, you'd want to be posting a bit more regularly. So it depends on the channel, and it depends what you want to achieve. But if you're running a promoted content campaign, you don't necessarily have to post all the time.
Brilliant. And I think obviously with respect to the fact that the social media preferences, the platform preferences are changing constantly, is that something that people like yourselves could help with if somebody was unsure where they should be going? Is that something that somebody could contact you and sort of work with you to understand what channels they should be publishing a dense.
Absolutely. Different channels are suitable for different people who are doing different things, aimed at different audiences. I mentioned there particularly Pinterest, for example, being a channel that we use for architects. Instagram, I think, probably the same. I suppose it makes sense, really, doesn't it? If you are aiming at people who are very visual, choose the platforms that have great photography.
Yeah.
If your product isn't really very photogenic, then Pinterest really isn't for you. And it's a question of matching your audience profile to the channels that you choose to use.
Brilliant. Thanks. I think one thing I think probably a few people probably be asking is Net Promoter Score. What is it? You mentioned it a couple of times in the presentation, but I think even myself, I'm still not 100% certain
Net
of what it
Promoter
does.
Score is really a reflection of whether people would recommend your product to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's a very simple question that we tend to include in a lot of our market research projects to understand the sentiment behind people's awareness of a brand. Because if you ask people whether they're aware of a brand, that doesn't necessarily tell you whether they think it's a good brand or not. A Net Promoter Score is a very simple and concise way of establishing that.
Brilliant. Thanks. I think that's a great sort of thing. We get asked all the time, obviously providing a digital platform for manufacturers, is how many times have people viewed something or downloaded something, but there's more than just the clicks and the downloads to the actual analytics and
and that's a really important point too. If you're looking at numbers, you really need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve before you put the report together. We tend to get asked to demonstrate effectiveness through web traffic, and that's one measure. If what you're trying to do is raise brand awareness, then you can assume that if somebody has seen some content and been interested enough to follow it back to your website, then you have at least sparked some level of brand awareness in their mind. But then you need to look at what they do when they get there. As I mentioned, if you bring 2,000 visitors to your page through a piece of content on one of the social media channels, but they all bounce straight off again, they're not the right people. So it's not all about how big the numbers are. It's about what people do as a result of the engagement you've created.
Quality, not quantity.
Yeah, bit of both is normally good.
Okay, I think we might have time for one more question. I think obviously you've focused a lot on content and the quality of content, regardless of whether it's going in a journal or on a social media channel. What types of things would you recommend in getting content right? What is it that somebody, or is this down to the individual that you're targeting? Is it thought leadership? Is it making sure that you've covered what your product might do and doesn't do? What would you recommend to people looking at getting content correct?
Well, there's two sides to it, isn't there? Because there's the client company, in our case, who wants to get the information about their products and services in front of an audience. But when you're writing content, the absolute key thing to think about is not what's interesting to you, but what's interesting to them. What is it about what you offer that will help your target do their job properly? So that could be really useful, timely advice on a new piece of legislation. Absolutely. We get a lot of engagement for those types of posts. It could be a new opportunity for product. It could be something about the market in general, anything that is really relevant to your audience. So those electrical contractors that I mentioned, for example, for them, it was a new set of wiring regulations that had come out just before we started the campaign. Clear and concise explanation of the changes, really significant for those electrical contractors because it affects their job every day. At the moment, there's a lot of commentary going on about product descriptions. You'll be aware of the new regulations coming out, the new code of practice.
Yep.
What does that mean to our target audience? What are our clients doing to make sure that their literature is absolutely accurate? And are they signed up to codes of practice and doing something active to reassure our audience that their marketing material is absolutely sound? So put yourself in the shoes of the person who's reading the information and what will help them do their job.
Brilliant. Thanks.
And make it fun.
Yeah. I mean, this is it. You've got to captivate your audience, haven't you? It's not just about filling people with a whole load of information, as making sure that they're enjoying it whilst they're doing it.
And one slight word, people are very focused on SEO, and SEO is really important because it's a good way of bringing visitors to your website. But a piece of copy that's only written to attract SEO won't do you any favors in the long run. If you attract people to your website, there has to be something that's really useful for them when they get there. So a 500-word blog that's only that's optimized purely for keyword attraction probably won't do that.
Yep.
So you really want to make sure the content's valuable, otherwise people won't come back to your website.
Great. Thanks very much. I mean, we've been doing a lot with the thought leadership pieces and knowledge articles, which you can, again, look at the resources page at the mbs.com. nice to know that you mentioned about the code of conduct with the product information as well. At the Construction Leaders Summit in April, we've actually got the CPA presenting on that. So if anybody would like to know more about that, feel free to register. It's free to attend that, and we'll be discussing that. And then lastly, I suppose making sure that you're reaching the relevant people at the relevant times with the relevant information, as Anna's just mentioned. Obviously, going back to the marketing cycle of discussing, it's this whole holistic sort of approach to PR that you need to consider, and maybe not just pigeonholing it to one section.
Well, you see, I might just have to pick you up on the way you're using the term PR there, you know, Lee. Because as perhaps you might have gathered from my presentation, I think anything that affects your reputation is PR. Yeah. It's not press relations. Could be an advertising campaign that went dreadfully wrong or dreadfully right. It still impacts on your reputation. A well-timed or badly timed social media post, a slip in a presentation, it's all affects your reputation. So I think it's all part of PR. Yeah, actually.
I think that's great. I suppose that would lead us to one final question. If somebody was looking to rebuild brand, if there'd been something potentially damaging or they got something wrong, is that something that a PR agency like yourself could possibly help with?
Absolutely. We're all about reputation. And I have said in the past sometimes that some of our most successful campaigns are the ones where nobody got any coverage at all, because what we were trying to do was to make sure something didn't get talked about. So PR protects your reputation in a number of different ways.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anna. Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed the webinar. We're going to wrap up there. If anybody would like to know more about the things that I've discussed surrounding MBS or the marketing cycle, please feel free to drop us a note at manufacturers@thembs.com or visit thembs.com for more information. And Anna, would you like to give your contact details out for anybody that would like to know more from Ridgemount?
Absolutely. I think the logo is behind me. Just go to ridgemount.uk.
Okay. Thank you very much. So on that note, everybody stay safe and take care, and we'll see you at the next session. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, Anna.